So this next exercise, this is also the slash and spread method. We're going to split the darts. We're going to do half as a French dart and half as a neck dart. So working from our sloper, the first thing you can see is we don't have either a French dart or a neck dart at this moment. So we need to split this dart into two completely new darts. Again, for this exercise, we're going to use both the craft paper and the point paper for our final draft and transfer. The craft paper to help because it's a little bit more secure for slashing and spreading. I would recommend using this for all the slashing and spreading as much as possible. It's more secure. So first thing we have to do is, number one, establish our grain line. Always, always, always going to be your starting point. Number two, we're going to trace this puppy off. I'm going to hook it to my grain line. Make sure it's nice and secure. We're going to trace the whole thing off because we're going to be playing with it. Neck, shoulder, armhole, including armhole notch, side seam, waist, including waist dart, and don't forget your dart points, the true apex. Mark your grain line so you know what we're doing. Here's my true apex. I want to draw in that waist dart here because this is what we're going to be closing out. So it's before any of the design lines that we want to do, remember the French dart is below the apex line, about 3/4 of a way or a half inch below the apex line. And we're also going to be putting it into the neck dart. So we're going to go about midway here. So these are my new style lines. And don't forget, I always want my armhole notch. So I'm going to cut this out. Cutting on the line. Center front, shoulder, armhole, side seam, waist, I'm going to just get rid of this dart excess because this guy we're going to close all together. And I'm going to trim out my shoulder and my armhole and my neckline. Remember, you're cutting on the line. As smoothly as possible. Perpendicular at any of the shoulder seam or center front. So I've cut out my waist excess here, and I want to add my new style lines where I'm doing my French dart and my neckline. So I'm going to connect those to my true apex because these are going to be the style lines that I'm going to cut on. Now we're going to transfer our work to the point paper. This will be where we do all of our drafting. Step one, always, always, always. Draft your grain line. Step two, hook your sloper up to your grain line. Secure your sloper. So now we want to open these darts up. I'm going to cut first on my French dart. I'm cutting to the apex, not through the apex. Remember, I want to back off about 1/8 of an inch from the apex. And I'm going to now, let's mark about halfway here. We want to pivot, we want to put half of this into the French dart and half of this into this next dart. So if I mark halfway between these two legs, it's right there. So I want to pivot this closed 1/2 of an inch, or halfway. So now that opens my French dart. But I still have this portion now, and I can secure this to pivot into the neckline. So I need to slash here. So what we're basically doing, I'm going to open this back up for a second. When you're splitting your darts, you always have the same amount of excess to play with. So in this particular case, we have 3 inches of excess to play with. That means we want to put 1.5 inches into the neck and 1.5 inches into the French dart. So when I close this waist, if I close this all the way, everything would go into the neckline. If I were to split this in half, I could then close this out, and then half of it goes into the French dart area. But I could also do it mathematically and say, I need 1/2 inch here, and 1.5 inches at the neck, and 1.5 inches at the French dart area. So these are just style lines. You always want to deal with what makes it look pretty. Maybe you want a smaller neck. I only want 1/2 inch in the neck, but I want a bigger dart at the French area. You have 3 inches to play with. So I could put 1 inch here, which means that 2 inches go into my French dart. As long as I'm maintaining the balance, the ratio of excess from this original dart, I can distribute it any way around the body I want. So I'm going to secure this down once you've established how much you want. So in this case, we're going to put 1 inch into the neck, 2 inches into the side seam at that French dart area. Now we have a lot of blending to do. I'm going to secure it nicely. You can see that bottom hem is very uneven. French curve to the rescue. Let's smooth that out so it's nice and clean. So much better. So mommy's happy now. Now we have this uneven neckline to deal with and this uneven side seam to deal with. So in order to clean those up, in order to blend those up, we need to true the darts. In order to true the darts, we need to create actual darts where they're supposed to be. So number 1, back off the dart. We've got our rule of 5/8 inch from the true apex. 5/8 inch in the full scale, which is 1/4 plus 1/16 in the half scale. So I'm backing off 5/8 of an inch from the true apex, which means my new dart leg goes here. I can connect this. And 5/8 inch on my neck dart goes here. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about neck darts specifically. In order to keep this more feminine, we can actually shorten the dart further. So we're going to shorten as long as the dart intake remains the same, you can shorten the dart off of a neck up to 1.5 inches from the true apex. The waist dart you want to keep, these are waist darts, gathering, fullness. We'll talk about these in more detail when we get into chapter 5. They're basically style design lines in order to accommodate the excess around the body. So we've shortened it further. So this is now 1.5 inches away from our true apex. The French dart is 5/8 of an inch away. Now we're going to true the darts. So for the neck dart, pinch on the new apex. We want the excess to go toward that center front. I fold on my new dart leg. I close my dart. And then look at how uneven that is. We need to clean that up. French curve to the rescue. Let's make that nice and smooth. So much better. Trace that off so that you have that dart excess in there. See the excess? So you know where that seam allowance is going to go. And open that back up. You can see that seam allowance there. And my new dart curve. Now, this area here on your half scale is going to be very small. You can, since our rule of thumb for seam allowance is 1/2 inch, as you can see, this is going to fulfill that 1/2 inch. So you don't need to split this seam allowance now with your intake. You can leave the full intake there. I'm going to show you how to draft the seam allowances around that. Don't forget your punch mark for that dart. It's 1/2 inch here or 1/4 inch in your half scale. Punch mark for the French dart, 1/2 inch from the new dart apex, 1/4 inch for your half scale. Let's true that dart. Pinch on the apex. Hold on the dart leg. Remember, we want the dart excess to go towards via gravity to the bottom hem. Close your dart. True the side seam. Transfer your dart excess. Open it back up. This one's got a much bigger dart intake, as you can see. So we don't want to leave all that bulk there. This is what we'd want to cut it with the seam allowance. So now I can go in and add all my labeling and true up all the lines. Don't forget my grain line here. If this is going to be cut on the fold, center front, on fold. I'm going to add my seam allowance. Remember, it's a 1/2 inch at the neck. Excuse me, 1/4 inch at the neck, 1/2 inch everywhere else. 1/2 inch on the dart legs. 1 inch hem. So on your French dart, we've got a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the dart legs. Make sure you're following the blended side seam and that you clean all this up with your pencil. At this neck dart area, because it's going to be very narrow, if you were to cut the seam allowances, it would be cutting in on itself. So we're going to actually follow that dart intake around the neckline in our transfer. And when we draft our notches onto there, remember to notch your dart legs. Let's get your punch mark. Right, so bottom hem, so you'll need to extend that center front. Transfer, seams perpendicular, French curve to smooth. Don't forget to transfer the armhole notch. Follow the dotted lines around the armhole. Make sure it's perpendicular where it hits the shoulder seam. Okay, notches. Transfer my armhole notch. Bottom hem. Side seam. Dart legs. Side seam armhole, shoulder line, neckline, dart legs. Notch is good. Labeling. Name, style. This is the 2 dart with the French and neckline. This is cut 1 on fold. It's size 8. Thank you.